headliner.
Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here, getting ready for our Week 4 injury update. I got some instant analysis of what just happened to Tua Tagovailoa. But before we get into all that injury goodness that you guys are looking for, make sure you check our friends over at Fantrax out. Fantasy basketball is just around the corner, and Fantrax has an awesome way for you guys to enjoy fantasy football, fantasy basketball, baseball, anything you guys want. Fantrax has the app for you. They're sponsoring this injury update video, so make sure you download the app. Let them know that you heard about them from your boys over at the Fantasy Headliners. But let's get into it. Injury update for week number 4. Okay, first things first, we got to get my instant reaction to what just happened with Tua Tagovailoa. The man gets stretchered off the field after getting thrown on the back of his head, had a what I call a fencing or decorticate posturing, where basically you take a brain injury and your body kind of naturally gets in this defensive position where the hands are kind of doing whatever they're doing, craziness, and you get your hands can become really rigid. It's a very, very scary thing to watch, but it is not indicative of the severity of an injury. Now, the NFL was already investigating the Dolphins and how they handled Tua after he took a hit on Sunday night where it looked like he may have been concussed. The team let him come back and play, and now he gets hit a second time in this tonight's game. And so that is a major concern because of a condition called second impact syndrome. It's where you have a brain injury or a concussion, and then you get a second injury before the first one is done healing. And it can cause basically your brain to swell, and it can be very, very serious. Is actually a life-threatening condition. That was my initial concern for Tua, was that maybe he had that going on. But we did get positive reports from the Dolphins already that he was able to leave the hospital, go home with the team. We're still keeping an eye on it, but it does sound like he doesn't have second impact syndrome, which is a very, very good thing for Tua, for fantasy players. And really just this is beyond fantasy at this point. When we're talking about a major brain injury, I understand that, but it is my job to talk about it and relate it back to fantasy. It does sound like Tua could return at some point this year. We don't know how long it's going to take. It's really about how his symptoms are managed, and the NFL is investigating this already. So I could see the Dolphins being extra careful with how long they wait with Tua to come back. But we know that it sounds like he avoided the worst of it. We're going to keep you guys updated as the weekend goes on if anything changes with Tua. But as of right now, we are just wishing a very speedy recovery from this very scary situation that we just witnessed on Thursday night. But it does sound like Tua is stable and that he is in a condition where they felt like he did not need to be monitored medically in the hospital. So good news for Tua, good news for fantasy players, but really it's all about Tua's health and his overall ability to maintain his health, short-term and long-term. We're happy to see that it wasn't as serious as what it may have looked, but again, very, very scary. Heading into our moment of silence for the week, we got 3 guys we need to talk about. First up, Sterling Shepard, Jalen Guyton, 2 guys tore their ACL. They're done for the year. Sterling Shepard's injury is probably one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Dude was just jogging down the field and his ACL exploded. I've never seen that before. Rashawn Slater, left tackle for the Chargers, is done for the year with a biceps tear. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with this offense, but they are banged up. The Chargers are having a rough go to start the year. They may be the team that's just snake bit with injuries all year, just underperforming across the board. Losing Rashawn Slater, huge for the run game, and that is Justin Herbert's blindside. So we do want to make sure that we take note of that, even though Rashawn Slater is not technically scoring any fantasy points. Let's look at our week 3 accuracy recap. This is something that we want to do every single week to let you guys know how I'm doing for the year. Last week, pretty solid, 86% on in-out calls last week. I'm okay with that. I'd like to get it up to 90, but I'll take 86. That's not horrible. 87% on the year. I did have 3 misses: Sammy Watkins, Christian Watson. 2 Green Bay wide receivers that I expected to play. They both missed. Sammy Watkins, I should have just known that Sammy Watkins was doomed for something horrible to happen to him. His hamstring injury ended up being something that sent him to IR, so he's going to be out for 4 weeks. and the circle of life continues for Sammy Watkins. He gets our hopes up in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, and then we pick him up, and then he gets hurt immediately. So Sammy Watkins to IR. You can go ahead and drop him. Christian Watson, I'll talk about him a little bit later. And then we got Jerry Jeudy. He had chest and shoulder injuries. He ended up recovering. But what I know is that when I say a player is going to miss the week and then they play, historically over the last 3 years that I've been tracking this, they average less than 8 fantasy points in the week that they come back if I said that I expected them to be out and they ended up playing. So keep that in the back of your mind. If I do miss, just know that those guys tend to not score very many fantasy points if they play hurt. Jerry Jeudy, same situation here. We don't know what's going on with Russell Wilson. That dude is just not cooking. If he's cooking anything, it's a microwave hot dog on a paper plate in the microwave, and I would honestly tell you that cooking is probably better than what Russell Wilson is doing right now. So until we see Russell Wilson produce and actually put up some meaningful numbers for the offense as a whole, I am not trusting Jerry Jeudy outside of maybe a wide receiver 3 flex option week to week. All right, let's head right into the quarterbacks here. And up first, we got Mac Jones dealing with a high ankle sprain. Left the game with a lot of pain, needed help getting off the field, needed help getting down into the locker room. Saw a lot of pictures of him just grimacing and just really not putting any weight on that ankle. Despite the initial reports that he might need surgery and it was going to miss 6 to 8 weeks, the team and Jones are now operating like they expect him to play sooner than that. Best case scenario with a high ankle sprain, you're looking at about 3 weeks. So I don't expect him to play. But it is interesting that the Patriots are trying to hide this up like it isn't significant. We all saw him crying on the way to the locker room. Okay, you're not fooling us with this one, Bill. We know that Mac Jones is hurt and that most likely Brian Hoyer is playing this week. That's what I expect to happen. That's what I'm pretty sure is going to happen. But it is good to know that Mac Jones may not be as injured as initially thought. Or is he? Next up, we got Jameis Winston dealing with back fractures in 4 vertebrae. He has not practiced as of Thursday. The team does seem to be preparing for him to not play this week in London. They've got Andy Dalton taking first team reps all week in practice, and they even have Taysom Hill coming in as a backup quarterback, which I don't think they'd be doing if they expected Winston to keep playing. But if he does get some practice time on Friday or Saturday, I would expect him to play. So keep an eye out for Jameis Winston. Is he practicing? Not a great fantasy option right now because he's clearly not what he should be. And he does have some injuries that he's dealing with in the wide receiver core, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Dak Prescott dealing with the right thumb injury and surgery that he had after week 1. He did get his stitches removed. This is more of just an update. Hasn't started throwing yet. I'm still eyeing week 6 as kind of the earliest that we see Dak return, but don't be surprised. We start to see some rumblings next week about him practicing and throwing a little bit more. He's just not quite ready. Week 6 seems like a lot more realistic for a return for Dak Prescott, but we just want to keep you guys updated on it. Justin Herbert's dealing with the rib cartilage fracture. He managed to play in week 3, did not put up a great fantasy day, but did throw for almost 300 yards. So we know that he is capable of throwing. He did look a little timid to me. Just didn't seem like he was quite himself, which I'm not surprised given the fact that he did have an injection in order to play. I think we're looking at another game time decision, but no reports of him having a setback in week 3 tell me that most likely he is playing in week 4. And if he's playing, I have a hard time sitting him. I just think he's one of those guys that you have to play because he has 3-4 touchdown upside week to week. Another update here, Zach Wilson coming off the meniscus tear in the preseason. I do expect him to make his season debut this week. Head coach has already come out and named him the starter. That's a good sign that he's definitely playing. I'm still probably taking a week to see what happens with this offense, but it is good to know that Zach Wilson is coming back, even if I don't think that you can really start him in fantasy yet. Let's move on to the tight end position. First up, we got Dalton Schultz dealing with a PCL sprain in week 2. He was limited Wednesday and Thursday after being a game time decision on Monday. So he tried to play in Monday night's game, but ultimately couldn't do it. It's a good sign that he was close enough to even give it a go on Monday, though. McCarthy said he did expect a full practice from Dalton Schultz on Thursday, but it is a little worrisome that Schultz did not actually practice in full on Thursday. So I still expect him to come back this week, but it's possible that this PCL sprain is not quite at 100% yet. Typically, you're looking at about 2 to 4 weeks for that. So the first week he comes back, I'm not expecting huge fantasy numbers, even though I do expect him to come in this week and play. don't expect classic Dalton Schultz, at least not this week. TJ Hawkinson's dealing with a foot injury. Last week it was his hip. This week it's his foot. He did manage a touchdown last week, but his target share is just absolutely laughable right now. The guy is just not getting enough work to be a high-end tight end one like we were drafting him to be. He practiced on Thursday. I'm expecting him to play, but the Lions are pretty banged up across the board on the offense. Does that benefit TJ Hawkinson? I think that it could. I do think that I'm dipping back in the well for TJ Hawkinson this week because I think the offense, the other injuries in the offense are significant enough that Hawkinson could get a bump in the target share this week. So I'm in on Hawkinson. One more week. Give me one more week. Let me see what happens. Moving on to the wide receivers, we're going to start with Michael Thomas. He's dealing with a right toe sprain. He has not practiced as of Thursday with this toe issue. It is worth noting that this is not the same side that he had surgery on last season that cost him the year, which is a good news, but no practicing for me, a little concerning. If he plays, I'd sit him for fantasy purposes. I'm not sure that he's going to play, though. I'm a little doubtful that I think that Michael Thomas is going to make it in. His teammate Jarvis Landry dealing with an ankle sprain, missed Wednesday's practice, but got a full practice in on Thursday. He's going to play. I am a little worried that Chris Olave may be taking over as the wide receiver one in this offense, but if Andy Dalton's starting, I don't know if you can trust any of those dudes to put up a great fantasy day. Moving on to Julio Jones. He has a partial PCL tear. We finally got some confirmation on what this knee injury he's dealing with is. He was limited on Wednesday and Thursday. This is the first time that Jones has practiced since week 1. I think there's a good chance that we see him this week, but I'm not really trusting him as anything more as like a tight end or, kind of a low-end flex option for this week. Chris Godwin dealing with a hamstring strain. Godwin hasn't practiced after his week 1 hamstring injury, but did technically get a limited practice in on Wednesday. He didn't practice on Thursday. They're designating it as rest, but I think they're just trying to hide the fact that he's still dealing with this hamstring strain. I'm not trusting him to play this week, but it is encouraging that he at least got something besides a DNP next to his name. Some encouraging news is Michael Gallup. He's coming back from an ACL tear. I said last week it looks like Gallup is eyeing this week 4 as a possible return date. Remember, they didn't put him on the PUP, so they expected him to come back by week 4. I think this may have been the plan all along. Michael Gallup, I do expect him to play this week. I don't know if you can throw him in your fantasy lineups, but if he's out there on waivers, he might be worth picking up as a possible wide receiver stash for later in the year when Dak comes back. Amon-Ra St. Brown dealing with an ankle sprain in week 3. He did manage to come back in that game, but has not practiced as of Thursday. So we do see this a lot of times with ankle sprains. They're able to basically go off of adrenaline and some heavy taping and play the first, when they initially injure it. But then after they take that tape off, they get a little time to rest and they're not moving. The swelling sets in, the pain sets in, and then they end up missing a week. If Brown doesn't practice on Friday, I think that's what we're seeing here with Amon-Ra. Do plan on him not playing this week. And if he does, plan on him being a little bit limited to play, for fantasy purposes. Another guy that we're updating here, Keenan Allen, hamstring strain that he's been dealing with since week 1. Does appear to be on track to return this week, or at least he did as of Wednesday. But then Thursday, there are reports that he was leaving practice with a trainer. Not what you want to see when you're talking about a guy coming off a hamstring strain. I don't want to speculate on what happened, but we do know that the re-injury rate for hamstring strains is at its highest in the first 2 weeks that they ramp up to come back. So there is a chance that Keenan Allen re-aggravated this hamstring. If I have Allen, I'm just planning on him not playing this week because I do think it's possible that he re-injured his hamstring, which is kind of worst case scenario. This is why hamstring strains are such a pain for me, for every fantasy player. It's just, you just don't know what's going to happen until you see them run again. And as they're ramping up, they can re-injure them pretty easily. Another guy with a hamstring strain is Christian Watson. He missed in week 3, got a full practice on Thursday. He's pacing a return this week, but my question is did Romeo Dubs already established himself as Aaron Rodgers' new favorite toy? Christian Watson was in the doghouse from his week 1 drop. Could be in the doghouse still. I think he's pacing as a wide receiver 3. He's probably droppable in leagues that have shallow benches, just because I just don't think that he's going to get the target share that he needs to be a consistent fantasy producer, at least anytime soon. Last up for the wide receivers, we got Hunter Renfrow dealing with a concussion. A little bit concerning here. We talked about Tua's concussions. Renfrow missed week 3, didn't practice at all last week, still is not practicing as of Thursday this week. So multiple week concussions are always a concern for me. If he doesn't see the practice field, there's no way he's playing. And even if he does, he was not producing for fantasy. So Hunter Renfrow, another guy you're probably just sitting on your bench and hoping for the best for later in the season. Next up, we're going to running backs. We got DeAndre Swift dealing with shoulder and ankle issues. He was dealing with an ankle injury prior to this week, and then in week 3, he re-aggravated that injury and then landed hard on his shoulder and has an AC joint sprain as well. I don't think that we're going to see DeAndre Swift back. He's not practicing until I think this could be something that kind of lingers on. The team has a week 6 bye. A week 7 return for DeAndre Swift and take it if he manages to recover faster than that. Sounds like this was pretty significant. I think we're looking at least 3 weeks for DeAndre Swift. Jonathan Taylor's dealing with a toe sprain. Taylor showed up on the injury report on Wednesday. Some soreness in his toe. It's not a concern until it's a concern for me. I don't think that Jonathan Taylor is going to miss this week. I don't think he's really in any danger of having any major issues here, but we just want to keep an eye on it in case something happens and it gets worse. Dalvin Cook dealing with a left shoulder subluxation. So I'm going to explain the difference because some people get confused with dislocation, subluxation. Subluxation is basically where the shoulder kind of pops out and pops right back in. A dislocation is the shoulder pops out and then stays out. So Dalvin Cook does have a history of dislocations in the shoulder, but this time it was just kind of popped out, popped back in. Either way, I do think that it was enough to take him out of the game because they were concerned about the structural integrity of the shoulder. He's had a labrum tear. We've known that for a while. He hasn't gotten it fixed because he doesn't want to have the surgery. I don't blame him, but I don't think it's bad enough that he's going to miss week 4 with this. I think he's going to play through. We've seen in the past that he is very, very capable of playing through this type of injury and producing for your fantasy team. So if he's playing, I'm probably still putting him in my lineup. But just know he is playing a little bit hurt. David Montgomery, a lot of reports on what this is, ankle, knee. I may or may not have an inside track on the Bears training staff, so I may or may not have some inside information that this is an ankle issue and that David Montgomery is trying to play this week, but the team is trying to be cautious with him, maybe give him a week off. So I don't expect David Montgomery to play. Khalil Herbert may be the better running back in that backfield anyway. I worry about David Montgomery rest of season if Khalil Herbert puts up another big game if Montgomery misses. Christian McCaffrey's dealing with a thigh strain. Always have to talk about Christian McCaffrey when he's on the injury report. This injury popped up after Sunday's game. He's had back-to-back weeks of over 100 rushing yards, but he doesn't have a great history of playing through significant injuries. And so if he's going to miss back-to-back practices, and if he does not practice on Friday or Saturday, I think there's a pretty good chance that Christian McCaffrey could sit a week. We know Carolina is super cautious with their star running back, and I would not be surprised if they took extra caution if he is dealing with something serious. So just keep an eye on it. You got to keep an eye on this one because Christian McCaffrey is not one that you're going to hear a whole lot about. Heading into the weekend, might be time to pick up a Chuba Hubbard as a possible late flex option to throw in if you need some help at running back. Alvin Kamara is dealing with a rib cartilage fracture. Kamara managed to play last week. Not crazy effective, but did play in 70% of the team's offensive snaps. I expect him to play through this injury. Again, we're not trusting this offense as a whole because Jameis Winston may be missing. Really risky RB3 option for me is Alvin Kamara this week. I don't think he's at 100% and he's not running the way that he normally would. I think something's seriously up with Kamara this year. Cordero Patterson, now he's been putting up some fantasy numbers, is dealing with a knee sprain, hasn't practiced yet this week, but the team is citing that they're resting the 31-year-old bell cow running back, oldest bell cow running back in the league right now. If Cordero Patterson gets a practice in today or on Saturday, I think he's going to play, but just keeping an eye on it just because he has not practiced yet. Last up for the running backs, we got James Conner dealing with a knee sprain. He was banged up last week, banged up again this week. Very disappointed last week in his performance. But if I remember correctly, Kyle told you guys to sit James Conner last week. So just know that James Conner is still hobbled with some injuries, limited in practice. I think he's still going to play. He is not at 100%. I think we're going to see a timeshare again. I'm looking for some other options in my flex spot instead of James Conner. You guys spoke to me last week in the comments. You told me, Ethan, you got to keep the kicker updates. Okay. So I did it. Okay. I put some more kickers on here just so you guys would know. Austin Seibert, Lions kicker, is dealing with a groin strain. Actually had groin surgery last year. So that injury combined with 2 missed field goals on Sunday that were makeable field goals in a stadium does not sound good for Austin Seibert. Seibert. I'm not really sure how you say his last name, but I'm just going to keep on rolling here. I think he could still play, but I'm sitting Seibert. I don't think that his hip is right, and I do worry about the fact that he just missed 2 field goals. He is on the hot seat. This guy could be somebody that we see losing his kicking job sooner rather than later if he has another rough week. Good news for the kickers. Harrison Butker's dealing with that left ankle sprain, limited on Wednesday, did have a planned day off on Thursday. He's pacing a return this week, but the team has changed practice squad kickers. They let go of Matt Amendola. Now they're going on to some other guy. I couldn't even find his name. I'm sorry for that, but just know that I think they made that move because they expect Harrison Butker to come in and kick this week. Game time decision, but I think he's going to play. Last up here, we got 2 defensive nuggets for you guys this week. Myles Garrett was in a car accident that actually involved him flipping the vehicle multiple times. Luckily, doesn't appear to have a major injury. So good news for Myles Garrett, but he did have a major car accident. He's probably hurting a little bit. Okay, so the team could opt to sit him this week as a precaution if that happens. I'm really liking the passing game for the Falcons this week. They've been surprising. They've been putting up some points on the board for our fantasy teams. We know Drake London is a must start at this point, currently leading the NFL in target share. But I think this could be a Kyle Pitts game. I think we could see Kyle Pitts finally break out against the Browns here. Really hoping if Myles Garrett does not play that we see a Kyle Pitts mega game, because we're paying big bucks for Kyle Pitts in fantasy this year, and we are not seeing the returns that we want from that investment. Second injury update for the defensive side that I need you guys to know about is Joey Bosa dealing with a groin strain. He did have surgery and is being placed on IR. But he is expected to return this year. We're looking at about 6 to 8 weeks for him. But lo and behold, another defensive line injury that could benefit my boy Dameon Pierce. I'm just saying, Joey Bosa's out. Dameon Pierce is up on the docket. Could it be a Dameon Pierce game for 2 weeks? I'm just saying. Whew, that was a lot of injury updates. If you appreciate this show, if you appreciated that I went the extra mile with 2 kickers and 2 defensive updates, please let me know in the comments down below. Leave me a like on this video. The doc appreciates a good like, okay? So if you like the video, if you like the content, make sure that you are subscribed to the Fantasy Headliners. We're doing injury updates every single week on all your most important fantasy players. If you like this update, please let me know in the comments, because I want to have those conversations with you guys. As always, the Fantasy Headliners appreciates our sponsors over at Fantrax for what they're doing. Make sure you check out the app. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Week 4 injury update is in the books, and the doc is out.